Hey guys, and welcome into episode 11 of Directed by Steven Spielberg. Considering the 34 current films that comprise Spielberg's filmography, today marks the roughly 1/3 mark in this journey throughout Spielberg's career. To mark this occasion is a return to the familiar with Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade starring Harrison Ford and Sean Connery. After the two previous drama-based films, I was very much looking forward to a return to the adventure genre where I believe that Spielberg thrives most. I have seen The Last Crusade many times now, but it was an absolute pleasure to revisit this film once again for this series. How does it stack up against the two previous indie films and Spielberg's filmography in general? Let's find out. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade begins with the young Indiana, played by River Phoenix, discovering his passion for archaeology and the relentless pursuit of historical treasures. The narrative quickly shifts to 1938, where Indy learns that his estranged father, Professor Henry Jones Sr., played by Sean Connery, has vanished while searching for the Holy Grail, a legendary artifact said to grant eternal life. Indy embarks on a perilous journey across Europe, racing against time and Nazi forces who are also seeking the Grail for its immense power. Once reunited with his father, the duo navigates a series of dangerous trials, showcasing their unique blend of wit, intellect, and bravery. Along the way, they encounter a host of friends and foes, including Elsa Schneider and the Nazis, and his friends Salah and Brody. As they close in on the Grail's location, hidden within the ancient temple of Petra, guarded by centuries-old knights, Indy must race against time to find the Grail and save his father. The climax sees Indy facing a series of life-threatening challenges, testing his faith, courage, and understanding of true immortality. The film ends with Indy, his dad, Salah, and Brody riding off into the sunset with the Grail consigned to the depths of history. The end. I've lost count of the amount of times I've seen this film now, but I still thoroughly enjoyed it upon this most recent viewing. There's a number of things to analyze in The Last Crusade, and fittingly, the best place to start is at the beginning. The flashback sequence with young Indy acts as a great catalyst for the events and themes of this film, setting up a number of key moments that will be paid off later on. We learn where Indy got his iconic look, the scar on his chin, but most importantly, we learn about Indy's strained relationship with his father in his formative years, the central relationship and focus of this film. Fast forward to the future and we have a couple scenes that very much mirror moments from the first Indy film. We have an almost identical scene with Indy and Brody in the classroom discussing Indy's adventures once again, and also an exposition sequence that introduces the film's MacGuffin, in this case the Holy Grail, and ultimately sets the events of the film in motion. It is worth noting that The Last Crusade does very much feel like a return to the formula of Raiders. Not just for the Nazis being the villains once again, but also structurally, as it's more of a globe-trotting adventure as opposed to the wacky, contained horror that is the Temple of Doom. When analyzing this film, one thing I noticed is that it doesn't have as many typical Spielberg hallmarks as his other films, particularly when compared to the previous Indiana Jones entries. There's some Spielberg lights here and there, a sunset shot, a zoom-in close-up, but it doesn't feel as quintessentially Spielbergian as his other films. That's not an inherently bad thing, but worth noting nonetheless. With that said, The Last Crusade has some absolutely fantastic scenes. The castle sequence where Indy reunites with his father as they escape the Nazis expertly blends action with humor. You get great moments of banter between two great actors that clearly illustrates the strain on their relationship whilst maintaining that light-hearted flair that the Indy films have always exhibited. The tank chase in the third act rivals the greatness of the truck chase in Raiders, upping the ante with the action and placing some serious stakes on our main protagonist. I love that it ends with a very emotional beat too, showing Henry Jones Sr.'s true feelings for his son, despite his disapproval throughout the film. It's a crucial moment that sets up the next scene, which is in my opinion the best part of the film. I'm speaking, of course, about the 3 challenges that Indy must accomplish to find the Holy Grail and save his father within the Temple of Petra. This is a fantastically made sequence that challenges Indy to his absolute core, testing his knowledge, faith, and courage to the limits. And what an amazing touch to make the Holy Grail the humblest cup among the options. It's testament to the film's understanding of the Christian subject matter that it's dealing with. Speaking of which, it's worth noting the significance of the artifacts within each Indy film. If you haven't noticed, each film focuses on a relic from a different major religion. The Ark of the Covenant in Raiders relates to Judaism, the Shankara stones to Hinduism, and of course the Holy Grail now to Christianity. Strange they didn't continue that theme in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and Dial of Destiny. But back to that scene. Indy chooses the right cup, bringing back to his father, saving his life before the temple starts to collapse. This right here is the most touching scene in the film and indeed the Indiana Jones series as a whole. And it's the ultimate payoff. Here you have Indy hanging on for his life as he tries to grab the Grail, just as Elsa unsuccessfully tried to do just moments before. Henry Sr. initially calls out to him as Junior, which he had done throughout the film and Indy's life, to Indy's disdain. But he then calls him by his desired name, Indiana, which gains Indy's attention before telling him to let it go. What a moment. The setup, of course, being that Indy always sought his father's approval and questions his father's love for him. But in this moment, he finally realized his father's love for him, just as Henry Sr. realized not long earlier at the cliff's edge. A fantastically executed payoff to a setup that rounds out the film and Indy's character arc very nicely. Now let's discuss performances. Harrison Ford is great as always, this time allowed to bring a more personal touch to his character, playing off that strained dynamic with his father. But the standout is obviously Sean Connery as Henry Jones Sr. He brings that massive weight of gravitas to the role, whilst injecting a comedic flair unlike what we're usually accustomed to seeing with his characters. He fits the tone of the film perfectly and brings real emotion to his more touching moments. I do have some minor issues with the film. I felt the humour, whilst great at most parts, does go a little far in some scenes. Whilst the indie films have always relied on humour to evoke light-hearted action, it gets a bit too silly at times and pushes an otherwise cool scene into corny territory. There are also some contrivances when it comes to the action, particularly during the tank chase when Indy is fighting off dozens of Nazis who assumedly are equipped with guns, but more often than not forget to use them in favour of engaging in hand-to-hand combat. It's a minor flaw that you could fault many films for doing, but it did bug me at times. All in all, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is an exceptional sequel that firmly holds its place within the series. It's a return to Indy's roots of fighting Nazis and searching for Abrahamic artifacts. The film concludes in the most fitting way with the literal riding off into the sunset shot, which perfectly concluded the trilogy. It would be a shame if they made more. But seriously, despite my self-admitted appreciation for parts of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the ending to The Last Crusade is so perfect and should have never been touched again. You could almost say that these three films
belongs in a museum. So do you.
And that is episode 11 of Directed by Steven Spielberg, done and dusted. It was great to return to the adventure genre of Spielberg's works after two very heavy-hitting drama films. As a child, I regarded The Last Crusade as my favorite Indiana Jones film, but as I've grown up, I've come to love Raiders and Temple of Doom that much more. Whilst I still very much love The Last Crusade, if you've seen my Indiana Jones rankings videos, you'll know that I have it in third place behind Raiders and the Temple of Doom. But quality-wise, I do place it on par with the Temple of Doom, and so therefore I am going to give Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade an 8 out of 10. This places it in 7th place below the Temple of Doom and above The Color Purple. So that concludes today's episode, and I hope you've enjoyed it. The next entry for episode 12 is a return to the drama genre of sorts for the little-known romantic fantasy film titled Always, starring Richard Dreyfuss. I have never seen this film before, but I am very curious to check it out simply based on the genre description alone. Looking forward to that, but until then, I thank you all very much for watching and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.